Hey, you have landed on Island Money 365. I am your host, Petra M. Brown. Welcome, 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 welcome. I have in the studio with me today, Rony Delva. Hi, Rony.
Hi, Petra.
It is fantastic. I'm so happy that you're here, Rony Delva. We met through Upper Bound. I was a little youngin' in Upper Bound, a little teenager when you first came in as the director of Upper Bound. So that's where we first met. And I was like, when I started this podcast, I was like, I got to get Rony on here because you're doing such amazing things with us first generation. Well, I'm not first generation. I don't know how I got in, but we're first generation students. So, let me give them a quick bio of who you are, Rony. Rony G. Delva is a doctoral candidate at Simmons University School of Social Work. He holds a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in social work from the University of Connecticut. Yukon, whoop, whoop. Mr. Delva currently works as a director for the Upper Bound program at Fairfield University. Upper Bound provides educational and supportive services for first-generation college-bound high school students. And what I like about this, when I was reading your bio, Rony, it says, Mr. Delva is a workshop presenter in the field of diversity, personal goal setting, conflict resolution, and intergenerational cross-cultural issues. So that's where I'm interested in is like, okay, Rony, what brings you to that, that area of cross-cultural issues and intergenerational? Because, first generation, that's what you deal with. What's going on? What brought you there?
Absolutely. Petra, before I answer your question, let me just say how proud and honored I am to be on your podcast today. You're talking about, life coming full circle for me. I remember when I met you, you were a senior in high school, actually, right? That was over 19 years ago, I think, right? Or 18 years ago. And then you were such a determined young lady. I remember when you first met me, the first question you asked me was that, what are my goals? What are my plans for Upward Bound? How am I going to make things better or different? I was like, oh my God, this young lady is taking me to task, right? And I also remember how you had your plans lined up. You said you were going to go to college, you're going to graduate, you're going to get you're going to get a master's degree as well. You're going to start your own business. You're going to buy a house. You're going to get married and have children.
Yes.
And then I have to say that, for our audience, that it happened exactly in that order. I had the privilege of attending your wedding. I went to your wedding, which that was such a wonderful moment in my life. I would never, forget this. And I had the pleasure of meeting your children, your husband, and your sister, and your wonderful mom, by the way. He's an example of, how dedicated mothers look like, So it's been an honor and a privilege, to actually, to have known you over all these years, right? To see how you have achieved thus far all the goals that, you've set for yourself. And I know there is more to come. I'm watching, with pleasure and anticipation.
Thanks,
in terms
Rony.
of what you do next. In terms of your question, with regards to the work that I've done with dealing with intergenerational issues within the Haitian American community, one of the things that I've noticed as we are going through our probably second, generation of, or probably even some may even say third generation of, Haitian Americans living here, specifically in the United States, but specifically here in Connecticut, or even to be more specific, in Fairfield County. This is where I grew up, in Stamford in particular, right? Since I migrated from Haiti to the United States some 40 years ago. The issue is that young people who are growing up here, they are different from the way that their parents, grew up or raised in Haiti. So there is something called acculturation that a lot of us, from the immigrant community have to do. So that means that you have to adjust, you have to adapt to the culture that is new to you. So that means in order to make that adjustment, you have to kind of, and I don't want to say necessarily reject, but you have to kind of act, different from the culture that you were accustomed to, right? Now, for older Haitian parents, and then I'm only I'm talking about Haitians, so I'm sure that probably other immigrants groups, go to the same experience as well. But I happen to know the Haitian culture fairly well, and I've experienced these issues myself, right? In terms of my parents, the issues with my parents, and I, growing up here in the United States. So the issue is that the young people, the children, so to speak, they act in ways that are different from the way that their parents, act. And that difference can create tension within the family because first it creates some sort of a communication issues because parents feel like they don't understand their children and their children feel like they don't understand each other. And the fact of the matter is that the lack of understanding or the issue of the understanding, it's because you have two cultures, that are, crossing, right? So you have the American culture and you have the Haitian culture. In the Haitian culture, parents tend to be a little bit more authoritarian. You know what I mean? They tell you, what to do, you listen. That concept of children are supposed to be right. Children are supposed to be heard, are supposed to be seen, not heard, right? Again, some people may say, well, that didn't happen in my family. There might be some exceptions here and there, but for the most part, I know, and in speaking for myself, that's how I was raised. My parents basically set the tone. They tell you what to do, and you have to listen, period. Whereas in the American culture, parents tend to be a little bit more permissive, right? And then kids, they have the opportunity to express themselves, give their opinions, if you will, to their parents. And then there's like some sort of a, back and forth, right? So it is less authoritarian. So, and I think that also with Haitian parents, because of language barriers, language difficulties sometimes, they might kind of feel that they're functioning outside of the American community. Whereas young people who are born here or who came at a very young age, they're actually immersing themselves into the American culture, while keeping some of the, the Asian culture. And then so in terms of parenting skills, you see a big clash. So the work that I did was to help parents. How do you communicate with these young people, right? And I did it with families. I did it in many instances where it was almost like group work, if you will, where I would have the parents and not so much group work. Yeah, it's group work, that family, therapy, so to speak, but to address intergenerational issues. And I found that, after going to a number of sessions, and we oftentimes come up with some solutions to help parents to actually, how to understand what's happening with their young people and also teach young people how to understand their parents. With parents, whether they're Haitians or American, respect is very important to us. We want our children to respect us. And I always tell the kids, always make sure that you talk to your parents with respect. And I explain to parents, and here's the other issue too, Petra. Parents say one thing at home, but when the kids go to school, they see a different type of, understanding or different type of expectation. So the problem is that when these kids go back home from school, so it's like they're on no man's land because here they are, they're listening to their peers, being treated, one way at home, or things are being different. And when they go home, things are different at home. So that can create a lot of problems, right? And also when you look at, TV and all the kind of subliminal, not even, or message or direct message that you get in terms of how the culture is presented, whether it's to the media or it's social media, in terms of TV, radio, and then now with the internet and everything else. So the kids are exposed to so many different sources of information, right? Then so when the disconnect happens between them and their parents, so it can create a problem. So that's why, yeah.
Well, that's the same thing in the Jamaican culture. Kids are seen and not heard. And I think that's just immigrant culture or island culture situation. I think even my friends who from different islands say the same thing. You are seen and not heard. You don't have a voice. It's like, oh, mommy says, daddy says, and that's what it is. No opinions here. And I think that's changing a little bit, especially, me and my son, I hear his opinion. He can give, in the end, he might not get what he wants, but at least I listen versus,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, for instance, I would say that the young people, like you much younger than I am. So you are going to what, second or third generation, right? So you grew up here. So you have adapted more into the American culture, if you will, right? So you are raising your children in a much more different way than your mom raised you. And I think it's the same thing for me. So your point is very valid. So we're seeing that a lot of that, what the issue that I was talking about, those issues are going away. The further you go into the generations, right? The more Americanized that we are becoming, right? And our children are being born here. Those issues are going away, right? But they're still overall, they're between, in terms of the differences between the cultures. So you still have to kind of address, because as Haitians, we think one way, we do things, one way. And then the point that I have to make too, I'm not advocating that one culture is better than another. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about differences. And those differences are to be celebrated. We have to understand them. We have to understand why why things are done differently, and then so we can embrace them. So we don't create that kind of distinction, or one is better than another, one is inferior to another. Then now you're creating, problems and issues, and then you're opening room for discrimination, right? Resentment and isolation even further. So to be clear, we're not talking about one being better. We're talking about them being different.
Exactly. So with Upward Bound and all the work that you do on Upward Bound, you see a lot of first generation or immigrants kids. They're not first generation, but they migrated here and they have to learn the culture as well. So how are you managing that, and what have you seen with that demographics?
Absolutely, Petra. That's a wonderful question. Actually, that adds more to what we were talking about. So to be exact, for instance, right? Again, when I was in Haiti, when I went to school, I went to Haiti. I came in when I was 18 years old. I just turned 18, and I came one week following my 18th birthday. When I went to school, the school was responsible for my education and for my discipline. They were the authority. They had power, right? And then now, of course, your parents can have a relationship with the schools, but there wasn't any PTO, parent, teachers organization. There were none of that stuff, right? I mean, occasionally you will see parents, usually mostly dads, who would go to the school, whenever a student got into trouble. You'll see that once in a while. But the school, for the most part, took care of everything. So parents basically stayed out. Of course, they would make sure that the kids did their homework at home and so forth and so on. But the school had the authority. Whereas here in the United States, we are for parental involvement. So for Haitian parents, or for the parents from the Caribbean, or even from Central South America, or even Eastern Europe for that matter, when they come here, it's hard for them to adjust to that concept of parental involvement. Because here in the United States, it means something totally different. Then you have the other issue too, where parents are working and their work schedule may not necessarily allow them, to come to the school during the day, between 8 and, 3 o'clock and so forth. So that creates another problem. So the school, when they see lack of parental involvement, that can be mistaken for them not caring. So one of the things that I've done in my role is to explain, as much as I can, to the administrators, teachers, and guidance counselors that I've been working with, is that the way that we approach education is different. And I also work with the parents to let them understand that you are now in the United States, so you have to learn as much as you can how the system works here. Because, Petra, it's about information and education, right? Timely information so people can act accordingly. So that's how I've managed, to deal with it. And again, now we're going to our second generation of Haitians who actually went to school here. Because when I came, my peers, our parents did not go because we were old enough where our parents could not have gone to school here in the United States. unless they migrated here in the 40s and the 30s. Because in terms of a little segue, in terms of Haitian immigration to the United States in particular, it really started in the 50s. But we did have a lot of Haitians who were coming towards the mid 40s, to the United States. So by the time I came here, I was 18. So I know some people were here very young, or I know I have a couple of friends who actually were born here in the 60s, even, right? But their parents did not go to school here in the United States, right? So whereas now it's different. Where now, like for instance, when you think my peers, my generation, our children are born here in the United States. So for those of us who went to school here, so we're not going to have the issues that our parents had. But you still hear them. But as Haitians continue to come, for the newly arrived, Haitians have to educate them in terms of how to be involved. And again, it's not unique to the Haitian community. It happens to most immigrant communities. That's another aspect of that cultural, differences that you and I talked about earlier.
So when you're dealing with the students in the Upper Brown, because you deal with more than the Haitian culture there, because you had me in my class, it was Jamaicans. I don't want to say Africans, because there was a lot of different countries in Africa that they came from, but the continent of Africa, there were Haitians, of course. I mean, there was a lot of immigrant population within the Upper Brown community. So do you see that what are some of the similarities that you saw outside of the parenting issue?
Yeah, I would say, yeah. I'll tell you, good point. And then Petra, I have to tell you, and then since you left Upward Bound, and I know you visit with us, you were a mentor, and thank you for that, to our students. The demographics have changed. Right now, most of our students are from Brazil, and they're from from South and Central America, and which is a reflection of the current demographics. And so, as you know, we recruit students from the public high schools, and then Basic, Harding, Central, and Fairchild Wheeler. And our students, we also recruit students on a first come, first served basis. They are referred by their guidance counselors, by their teachers, and also friends refer friends, right? So, like you said, let me just say this. In Bridgeport is a very culturally diverse school district. I think I heard so-and-so stat that over 40 or 50 languages are spoken in the district. I mean, that says a lot about how rich the cultural, diversity is here in Bridgeport. But for us in particular, our demographics have changed totally. Even before I came to Fairfield University, when I first started doing Upward Bound, I used to work I was a director at North Community College. And I remember the federal government gave us the mandate was 60, 30, 10 to get to 100%. So 60% of our population of students, that is, had to be African American or Black, right? 30% had to be Hispanic and 10% white. So 60, 30, 10. Guess what? We know that those numbers, can even won't work anymore, right? And they have not worked for a long time because and then, by the way, this is the other trend that probably has to do because there is this migration of African Americans returning to the South, right? Petra, there was a time where, like you were saying earlier, we had a lot of we had African American students, and we had students from Africa and students from the Caribbean. But the majority of our students of color were African Americans. I'm talking about students whose parents, both mom and dad, had their ancestry, after Africa from the South, right? And they were African Americans from the United States. Now we have less than a handful of students. Oh yeah, this is very interesting. And I think my theory is that it has something to do with the demographics changing, and then that, people are moving back to the South, and then you have bigger influx of people from Brazil, from South Central America, and, all over the place. So then we're seeing, right now, most of our students are from South Central America, and we have more students from from Jamaica, more students from Haiti, and certainly, and the number of students from Africa goes back in, it goes up and down, but but when we do something called our annual our potluck, where we encourage families to bring food from their culture. Oh, Petra, it's wonderful. I mean, you should see. We get food from all over. I would say from all the continents, right? So it's really great, and that's our way of celebrating, the diversity of culture that we have, Upward Bound. Yeah. So yeah, that's a wonderful question. So we have to deal with the changing demographics and making
Wow.
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So what are some of the obstacles you see the kids facing? So we know some of them have the language barrier, right? Their
Yes.
parents don't understand. So we have the kids ask to translate, which they shouldn't do for their parents, right? So what are some of the obstacles you see like the kids themselves, or you don't have access to that, or you don't see that really in Upper Bound?
Yeah, some of the obstacles. Well, this is no secret that there are some challenges in Bridgeport, public school, and I always, there's always a disclosure in terms of for transparency. I always talk about the fact that all three of my daughters graduated from Bridgeport Public School, right? And then all of them are college graduates. One has an MBA, one is a nurse, and then they all gainfully employed, right? And then again, they all three of them graduated from college. And the things that I've heard from them, and as I've heard from other students who went to the public school in Bridgeport, when they go to college, they have to. It's a cultural. Not only it's a cultural shock for them, it's also a bit of a challenge academically because they are not prepared well enough, right, to withstand the academic rigor of college. And then the kids are resilient, and then I know they all manage. Most of them have managed. I mean, the ones who've managed to stay in college and graduate with a 4-year degree. So in terms of obstacles, that's the one thing that you hear constantly, right? How in terms of their math and science skills and reading skills also tend to be very low. So programs like Upward Bound, we try to bridge that gap by providing that extra support, whether it's tutoring, extra academic support, making sure that the students they come on Saturdays for classes, for academic and cultural enrichment as well. That's one of the ways that we try to bridge the gap. And I also find that students who come to Upward Bound, they tend to be very motivated, to begin with, right? And then so it's easier, to work with them, even if there might be, some of the deficiencies that we're talking about. But if they are willing to take advantage of the opportunities that Upward Bound provides, then they can bridge the gap, and then therefore their transition to college will be a little bit much more easier. But that's what we keep on hearing, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I can be a testament to that. It was very challenging. Luckily, you don't take students from Kobe Cathedral anymore, but my mom took me out of the public schools after middle school and then put me into Catholic school for high school. And even with that, and we did well, we worked hard, but even with that transition to college was like, whoa. But I feel like with the determination, because when you go there, you meet a lot of us and we're like, okay, let's get this done. We get together, we have our table. It's like, let's get this done. Let's get out of here. Let's be successful. Let's do what it is that our parents migrated and made those sacrifices for. So what are some of the money issues you see that the students and the family face, especially because you work at a college preparatory program, Upward Bound? What are some of the challenges or the money concerns you see the students have and the parents have?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, the money issue is huge, particularly because the cost of college tuition keeps on getting higher and higher. And then it looks like, and it's not going to go down anytime soon, right? Now you're getting to, and I know your question because so I'm addressing that. We can address the tuition quickly and move into, financial literacy, which I think is also a very important issue, to talk about. So when you look at it, when you consider that one of the guidelines or requirements for 2/3 of our students have to be first generation and low income. And by first generation, what we mean is that their parents cannot have a college degree. It used to be years ago, if you had a college degree from overseas, whether you have a college degree from, let's say, Jamaica, Africa, Haiti, or anywhere else, it didn't count towards the first generation guideline. Now, guess what? It counts. So if
Wow.
if you have a degree from overseas, whether you are working in that profession or not, the federal government consider you not to be first generation, right? And we look at income. Now, I always explain what when we're talking about low income, especially living here in Fairfield County, we look at people's taxable income, not their entire income. Because if we were looking at the overall income, no one would qualify, for the program. Because as it is, what is like, what would it be? What does it mean to be poor? I mean, we know what it means to be poor in Connecticut, but that's not what this discussion is about, right? So that's what. So now, when you look at the cost of tuition, I've had people asking that question: Why should I send my children to school? Have in a school like Fairfield, that costs about $60,000 per year times four. That's almost $240,000 for a bachelor's degree, right? And then that student, owes almost over half of that money, depending on how much financial aid or scholarships or, loans that they've taken, they have to pay back that money. And then let's say if they go get a job that doesn't pay them well enough, how are they going to pay the loan back on top of the other, living expenses rather, that they have to deal with. So that's an issue in and of itself. So that means that requires that we do financial literacy to really take a hard look at the numbers. What does it mean? How much money can I afford to pay for school? How much money do I need to make, to earn a year in order? So that's what we have to actually do, because now it's no longer good enough to just say, go to college, you're going to be okay, everything is going to be fine. No, you have to really, and you have to also pay attention to your major. What is it that you're going to major in? Because some majors pay more. Like if you're in IT, if you're STEM field, you probably will make more money. If you're an engineer, you probably will make more money, let's say, than somebody who has a bachelor's degree in English, right? Unless you write a book or you go get a master, you go get higher degrees. And then again, depending on what is it that you do, most likely you're not going to make a lot of money. So you have to also be careful in terms of what is it that you major in. And then the problem that we are facing, and I did go back to the barriers that you were talking about, what we're finding is that we are performing in the quote unquote minority community. There is an issue in terms of our performance within the STEM field, with math and science. And then we have fewer students of color going into engineering. We have fewer students of color going into anything that is STEM related. And that's where the money is, you see? So that creates a problem. So the problem we have now, if we are pushing education as we should, and then people are going in huge debt, and then they come out of school with not too much employable skills, if you will, then you have a problem. Then are we breaking the cycle of poverty? Because to me, it's a social equity, it's a social justice issue. It's an equity issue, but how do we, address it? Having been an educator, working in, education and so forth, I am a proponent of education. I'll tell people, yeah, go to college. But I'm telling folks now, you have to really be careful in terms of how you going to finance it, A, for the 4 years or plus, if you go for advanced degrees, and then B, after you finish school, how are you going to get paid and how are you going to take care of yourself? Because if the goal is to get out of poverty, then, how do we get out of poverty? Money is the only way. out of
You know what I was thinking about. You know what I was thinking about as well.
yeah.
As immigrants, we're like, college is not an option, right? It's just expected. But going through college and seeing other fields like trade school, I mean, we don't talk about it much in the community, right? It is a profession. It is a wonderful profession. I mean, I pay my plumber a lot of money. He makes more an hour than I do.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Huge. Huge. And Petro, I'm glad you said that, because the other thing that's happening too, talking about demand and supply, right now, from what I understand, the average plumber in the United States is in his or her 50s, getting older. And then same thing can apply, for electrician, carpenters, and so forth. So that means in a few years, we are going to, as these people start to retire, we're going to have a shortage. And then because we've been pushing for college so much, in the past 20 or 30 years or so, we've seen a decline in terms of students going to the trade schools, right? And then and then that's where you can learn to become a plumber if you go to a trade school, right? You figured someone can graduate from high school, go to a trade school, learn how to become a plumber. If they are certified, licensed and insured, and so they're good, they can easily make $100,000 within the first couple of years after learning their trade. Mm-hmm. Whereas, unless you get into IT for a college student, you're not, and then without any debt, by the way. So they didn't take any student loans, to learn that trade. So, when you do the math, you'll be like, oh, but again, if you want to go, this is where I think we come in. To me, the worst part is that when you have students who have no clue in terms of what they want to do, they're wasting their time. They go to college, end up not doing well, end up dropping out. And then even after you drop out, you still have to pay the loan that you took, by the way, right? And then, so college hasn't really been successful for them. But they didn't learn a trade either. So now these young people, they go into their 20s and 30s trying to figure out what is it that they want to do. You're talking about poverty. Now you're signing your life, to a life, long of poverty. Whereas if you don't want to go to college, if you say college is not for me, let's identify a trade. Let's find something that you can do, because you can make decent money. You can learn a decent living, So I think that we have to be careful and not keep on promoting, like you said, for you and I, it was in the Caribbean for the most part. For us, it wasn't if we had to go to college. We had to go to college. We had no choice. We had to go. So I think that we have to kind of modify that. But again, as a director of Upward Bound, I promote college 100%, but I promote it with advice in terms of, okay, what there are the alternatives that you need to pursue. And particularly in terms of that demand and supply, you're going to get to a time where those people in the trades will be making more money than college graduates based on, so that's why. And then never mind the higher, like if you want to become a doctor or a lawyer, then you talk about even more money. Eventually, you probably will make enough money. But then again, then you go into that, financial literacy piece that I find that we're not educating students how to handle their money, and then it doesn't matter how many degrees that you have, how educated you are. I don't know of any schools that actually teaches any schools that teach, rather, talking about.
Well, that's going to change because I believe Connecticut just implemented a law that now it has to be part of the curriculum for graduation.
Oh, good.
So I'm very excited about that. And that's one of the main reasons why I started my financial coaching business, Brown Financial Solutions, was because I'm very passionate about especially the immigrant population, island population, that we learn money, how to manage it here. Because we're managing two households. So we're managing our home here, managing our home back home on the mainland. So how do we manage that and still build wealth still build financial stability here, take care of family here, so that's very important to me. So when I saw everything that was happening, I was like, I was like, no, something got to change. We got to start being more informed.
Yes,
Because
yes.
we work hard and we're constantly working, but
Mhm.
how do we make our money work for us? And that's why I started that coaching business. But talking about money, as this is Islet Money, Rony, what's your money story growing up?
Well, my money story growing up, thank you for asking. That's a good question. Well, I remember as a kid growing up in Haiti, right, in Gonaïve, my grandmother, my parents, I have to tell you a quick history. My parents left Haiti when I was 4 years old. So that was in 1968 when my mom and dad left Haiti to come to the United States. So my brothers and I were raised by my grandmother, my maternal grandmother in Haiti. And then I always say that grandma was before her time. You're talking about a feminist, a woman who didn't take any junk, And then in terms of her limited education, she went very far. She had her own business, right? And I remember she was a butcher, right? And then the difference I learned at a very young age from her, there were other people who were butchers too. They were buying meat from other people and they would resell. But my grandmother, she would buy the animals. She'll buy the cows, she'll buy the goats and the pigs and everything else. And then she'll butcher them, herself. And then she would sell the meat. So she owned it, right? And then because she was buying livestock, she also ended up buying, she had some, things that to feed, the animals with farms, basically. So she would own, a couple of, not necessarily farms, but, she would own a couple of piece of land where she could grow, whatever, she needed to feed the animals. So then that was a business by itself. And she used to sell water. I'm not talking about bottled water now, because you imagine the other, because when you say that to me, what do you mean you used to sell water? Yeah. People would bring their container, because we had running water at home, then my grandmother would sell water. She used to sell ice. You know what I mean? And the ice cubes, and you sell like 10, 15 ice cubes for X amount of money or whatever. And I remember she had a little, like a shoebox of sort. She would keep her receipts. And I remember as kids, we had credit in all the stores in Gonaïve where we grew up. And so whenever we needed to buy clothes or whatever, we had to say, I am so-and-so's Madame Pierre's grandson. And she had credit line in all the stores. And every month we used to see her pay her bills. And as a kid, our electricity was never cut off. For many years, we didn't have a phone. We didn't have a house phone. By the time that I left Haiti, we did have a, home phone. And, we had, water, wanting water. Her bills were always paid, right? And we knew that she had a bank account. We used to go to the bank and stuff with her. But we were never taught we taught how to be respectful in terms of having credit. But we didn't call it credit in terms of that traditional way when we call credit here in the United States. But it was credit, because when you go to a store and you say you're so-and-so's, grandson, and then you'll buy, and then my grandmother will pay later, that's credit.
Yes, it is.
So she was teaching us the importance of credit, the work ethic. So one thing that we grew up with, watching my grandmother work so hard, and even watching my mother, my father, work very hard in their lives. So we were taught, work ethics at a very early age. And we were taught, the concept of ownership, whether you're going to own your own business, own your own home, and everything else. But the message, the instruction, they were not direct. They weren't like, my grandma never said, okay, this is what I want you to do. You know what I mean? When you go up, I want you to have good credit. I want you to save your money. It was my mother would talk about saving, later, but there was no, I would say, direct way, it was kind of implied, so to speak, right? And I think in terms of financial literacy, it needs to be more direct. It cannot be just implied. So that's my that was my short, version, telling you, yeah. But the work ethics, the, valuing money, and my grandmother used to lend, people used to come to her, people would borrow money, from her. all the time and everything else. But I remember in terms of her paying her bills on time, her keeping the receipts and everything else. And the house we grew up with there was like a lot of business transaction going on, Like I would say, like for instance, people would come from the country, they'll sell, chicken, they'll sell because we use a lot of charcoal. Yeah, they cut down the trees to make charcoal because Haiti has a problem with electricity, right? And my grandmother would buy charcoal. She would buy things from the people from the countryside, and the country people, they earn their money. They'll go to the city. They'll buy whatever they needed. Then they go back to the country to produce, to make more stuff. So there was a lot of, money exchanging hands. So we grew up with that. The one regret that I have, it's like, if my grandmother had passed on that, now my father ended up becoming a lawyer. My mother went to finishing school, but they were not interested in taking over my grandmother's business. If they took over because my grandmother, with her limited education, got us very far. But now this is my experience, Petra. I probably can multiply that by thousands of Haitians. Right now, as I'm talking to you, my grandmother left us things that we have land, things in Haiti that is basically not being managed, or we're not multiplying. We're not taking what she did, to the next level. So we're not building on the success. And I think that's the problem with the quote unquote third world countries. And then what we end up doing is that we leave our countries to come to the United States. And meanwhile, the resources that we have at home are not being exploited or developed to the extent that where we could be financially successful. So I have that kind of very, I would say, complicated history, if you will, with money in that sense. And I have a feeling that if you talk to most immigrants, you probably would find that they probably have a very similar story. And it's unfortunate. And it has to do with the way I know that's another conversation, in terms of how the global economy works. Because oftentimes we talk about immigration, there is this concept of pushing and pulling in immigration. So the economic situation in our home countries are pushing us out of our countries. And then the global economy is pulling us to the United States or, all the countries. So we're being pushed and pulled, and then most of us don't understand that. All we know is that we find ourselves out of Jamaica in the United States. We find ourselves out of Haiti, out of anywhere. But we are being pushed and pulled. That's how the immigration, so that's how it works. And then at the end of it, it's about money, which is the question that you ask. And how do you manage it? How do you put it back in your community, so your community can progress and live.
Would you say that you had some challenges after you guys migrated? Do you say some challenges in terms of how your mom and dad manage it, and then how you come to manage it in your own family?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll give you an example. I was talking about this not too long ago. My mother, I think that right now I've made way more money than my mother, has made when she was working in the United States, because my mother retired and so forth, right? But my mother probably had saved more money, because my mother had a very good system, in terms of making her budget or portion towards savings, making sure that her bills were paid. And she'll tell you that, live out, below your means and above your means. But in all fairness, there were certain things that my mother wasn't taking vacations. So even though we make more money, we tend to spend more money because of our lifestyle, right? So so that's one regret that I have. And sometimes I scratch my head. I'm like, how, I think I kind of explain it, but there is more to that, because, the saying, it's not how much you make, right? It's how much you keep, how much you save. So I think so that's my personal, frustration, challenge, if you will, in terms of how, I view money. Because Petra, in terms of work ethics, I've worked since I've been here, since 1982 to now, high school, college, grad school, blah, blah. I've worked. I've never not worked. In 40 years, I've not worked only for 3 months. When I was a senior in college for my bachelor's, I didn't work. I was laid off actually. I was working at the Urban League. And then, was that Urban League? Yeah, I believe so. I was about to finish college and then was working there and I was laid off. And I did, during those 3 months, I worked as an intern for Congressman Shays, who was a Republican congressman, I think 4th or 6th district in Connecticut. His office was in Bridgeport, and I used to commute from Stamford to Bridgeport to work. I learned a lot during that time. So that's the only time I did not work. So
internship is considered working, Ronny.
Yeah, exactly. So I was doing something, right? Yeah. There wasn't a paid internship. But I mean, my point is I was using my time, constructively to do something. But other than that,
So what are you going to do to change that? And how are you going to make sure that your kids don't repeat that cycle or get out of that cycle?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think now we are a little bit more intentional because I know my mother did do this with us, like when we took the kids to the bank to open a checking account and everything else when they were old enough, opening a savings account so they know the importance of saving. I can say, right now, our kids, one thing that we're very proud of, they know how to pay their bills. But see, that's the thing. We teach, I heard this thing, forgive me if I'm not even saying it right. I heard that on poor, and that relates to our conversation. They said that poor people work to pay bills, middle class people work to get good credit so they can buy things they can afford. Then they keep on paying their credit card bills, and then rich people make their money works for them. You know what I mean? So rich people, their money works for them, right? And then so and I think to a certain degree, there's a lot of truth to that. And I think that so we're like, you have to go to college, you have to pay your bills, you have to get good credit, but have we did we sit them down and say, okay, this is what you need to do, having a financial strategy? I mean, listen, we have 401k, we've always had insurance and everything else. And those are the kind of responsible things to do. But I think about your question is more deeper than just having because those things should be considered basic, right? Having life insurance, having 401k if you have the opportunity. Not everybody in this country has 401k or 403b. It's a middle class type of, I don't want to call it luxury, but you know what I mean, right? But I don't think that we've done a great job in terms of instilling, some values in terms of, okay, this is what it means to have $1. This is what you do with that $1. You know what I mean? You put 50 cents away and then, so forth. Yeah.
So as a community, we need to do better at conveying the value of $1 or what $1 can do for you and make it work for us better. I totally agree. I said it all the time. I say, how do you make your money work for you? And that's what I call one of my workshops actually, right? I say, make your money work for you. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm like, we work so hard, doing multiple jobs, sacrificing family time. But at the end of it, we only have Social Security. I was like, nope, that has to end. That's why I'm so passionate. And I'm going out there and working my tail off just to provide that information. Because I just don't think it's acceptable. It's not acceptable anymore.
I agree. And then there's this other thing too. You have to work smart, not hard, right? And then sometimes I've seen situations where you have people who've been working very hard and they're like one disaster, from one situation away, they lose their job or some illness happens all of a sudden, that shouldn't have happened. These people, they've been working very hard. But if your money was working for you, then you would have better financial security.
So Ronny, why did you migrate here? Why?
That's a good question. My dad was 25, just finished law, graduate from law school. My mother was 20, 22. Because my parents married when I was born. My mother was 20, 20. So in the 50s, right? At the end of the day, remember what I said about push and pull, in terms of immigration? In the 50s, 60s, there was a big push because when Duvalier was president, a lot of young Haitian professionals were leaving, Haiti. For political reasons. I'm not suggesting that my father was a political asylum seeker. I'm not saying that. My family was not prosecuted in Haiti. I'm not saying that. But in the 50s, when Duvalier was president, there was a lot of, political persecutions going on. A lot of people, especially doctors, lawyers, were leaving Haiti. That was the first group of migration out of Haiti, right? And then in the 80s, then you started to have, with the boat people situation where people would actually get into boats, would actually leave Haiti, in huge numbers and so forth and so on. Around the same time when Cubans were leaving Cuba as well, So for my family personally, so my parents left Haiti in 1968. They came here. I was 4 years old when they left, right? My mother wanted us to come to the United States. But my father, because he had a terrible situation here, he didn't like it here because, first of all, my father came here, young lawyer, could not work here as a lawyer in the United States. He was working in a factory at Clearwater, in fact. He was miserable. Then in the 70s, early 70s, Duvalier, Haiti started to fill the so-called brain drain where professionals were leaving. So the Duvalier administration, they were giving scholarships to Haitians. Like if you're in the United States or you will go to Switzerland to study public administration, then you can go back and work in Haiti. And my father left Stamford, Connecticut. I forgot what year exactly, but it was in the 70s. Went to Switzerland, studied public administration. From there, went back to Haiti. And then, so he never came back to the United States. I mean, he would come back on vacations and everything else, and he stayed there. And then, but my mother stayed, for their own little person. There's another family history there. My mom decided to stay here, and then my dad stayed there. So we were down there. So we were between my grandmother and my dad, right? Then my father didn't want us to come at all. If it were up to my mom, I would have been here by the time I was 6 years old. But I ended up coming at 18 because after a while we're like, no, we're not staying anymore. We wanted to come live with my mom. And then also the push to come to the United States. And that's the unfortunate part in terms of migration. I remember as a kid growing up, I always felt like if I were in Haiti, I could have been successful, right? In terms of whatever I decided to do. But my mind was to come to the United States because we were thinking about, either coming, going to France, leaving our country to go somewhere else. And to me, that's a disservice. This is where we destroy our country. When the people who are educated, right, or who have the potential to do something, when they are the ones leaving, then you don't have a middle class, right? And you don't have, there is a saying, right? If you don't educate, this is a little digression, but forgive me. If you don't educate people for 4 generations, for 3 generations, by the time you get to the 4th generation, there won't be any educated people to lead them. So there won't be any leadership. Yeah. So Haiti is at that point now, we're going into the 4th generation. Oh yeah. So Petro, for 3 generations, if you don't educate people for 3 generations, by the time you get to the 4th generation, the 4th one, you're in trouble. And I think we're getting to that point right now. So it's really sad. And then the other statistic I can throw for our conversation is that I've read that close to 70% of Haitians with college degrees live outside of Haiti.
Wow.
Now, if 70%, now I'm talking about the Haitians who are living outside. So can you imagine if even if you had even half of them down there, what difference it would have made? And now I know that the problems that we're facing, it's not only just about education. We do have a problem with, corruption. We have a problem with, waste. We have a problem with, it's basically, corruption, waste, and then political instability. And at the core of this is education. And if people are not educated, they won't be able to put a system together, right? And then so to get rid of, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. But certainly those issues are at the core. So to go back to your question, so there I could not pinpoint to a specific reason, but I can say that economic, was one, because my mother had said that she wanted a better life for us, for her sons. So I actually, if I were to quote my mom, I would say, yeah, my mom said that she wanted a better life for us. And then she's like, hey, we're coming to the United States. And then they came. And then so here we are. But I think that for me, again, I came in when I was 18 years old. So I live here in the United States much longer than I've lived in Haiti. But my heart, guess what, is still in Haiti. You know what I mean? Right? Sometimes I'm like, how my life would have turned out if I were there as opposed to being here. And I can imagine, most immigrants, face the same dilemma, right? In terms of, being here. So did I answer your question?
Yes. You got here.
I got here, right? Yeah.
Rony, I'm so happy about the work that you're doing with the young generation, new generation, the first generation, and those who are still immigrants and coming here. I'm very excited that you're trying to bridge that gap and create an understanding between the parents and the children, because as you come, we have language barriers, we have so many different barriers that we face. But it's good to have someone to just be there as an advocate for us and showing us the path or showing us an understanding of, hey, this is how the system works, versus just crashing and figuring it out, crashing and bumping your head against the wall.
Yes.
And so it's good to have some kind of guidance there,
exactly.
Which most of us, when we came back in the early 90s, my mom didn't have any guidance, so I had to figure it out ourselves. Mm-hmm. So it's good. So that's why, I started this podcast for us to start talking and having conversation and breaking down, ripping down the veil that is not knowing, so I appreciate that. But before we go, Rony, quick trivia.
Yes.
Not trivia, but what's one saying? Because we know Caribbeans, parents have a lot of saying. What's a saying that your parents always use on you when you were younger? You can say it in Korean, they can translate it and then translate it for us.
Yeah. That's a good one. I usually say them too. Oh, my grandmother used to always say avant fête pour si fait la belle.
And what does that mean?
So basically the translation is that it's almost like you can, so in other words, if you're having a party and you say you're having a party at home, right? And I come to your house, let's say a day or two before the party. I see that you are cleaning the house. You're doing a lot of stuff. Food is coming. There's a lot of activity. Things are moving. The house is being cleaned. So that means that's a sign that, oh my God, that party is going to be it's going to be nice. So say I haven't fait pour apprécier fête la belle. Based on the preparation, you can tell whether or not, how good it's going to be. So in other words, if you practice, if you spend time doing your homework, if you spend time studying, I can almost predict what kind of grade you're going to have. You know what I'm saying? In other words, it's almost like, based on what you do today, you can tell how tomorrow is going to be. So say I haven't fête, right? Say I haven't fête pour si fête la belle. So I always always think about that. So conversely, Petra, can you imagine if you go to somebody's having a party tomorrow and you go to the house today, the house is dirty, or let's say if it's not dirty, the house, there is nothing. You don't see any sign that somebody, they're getting ready for a party. You're like, wait a minute, what is this? It's not going to be good. But if you see activities going on, the house is being clean, food is coming. You see a lot of festive getting ready. So the prep. So basically the prep you can tell how successful somebody's going to be based on how they prepare, based on how they work.
I like that, Rony. I like that. Thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you for coming through.
C'est avant fête pour si fête la belle.
Yes. I won't practice that online. I won't practice that in the back. I'll do that off outside of the studio. But thank you so much for coming through. I really appreciate you dropping some gems and some knowledge and some insight for us. And until next time, remember, keep your money airy.
Airy.
Wait, hold on there. My beautiful people, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tap that notification bell. We are here every second and fourth Sunday of the month. Also, the information for our guests can be found in the show notes. So what are you waiting for? Wanna subscribe?